Hi, I'm AJ Hogue, one of the teachers of Learn Real English, and welcome to our video course. Now, let's get started with rule number one, or secret number one. And rule number one is to always learn English phrases. And to never study just individual words. So, in this course, we're going to teach you a totally new way to learn English, a totally new way to study English so that you can speak English quickly, easily, automatically, powerfully, confidently. So, what's the old way of learning English? You know it because you learned it in school, you've been using it for years and years and years. You sit in a classroom, you've got a textbook, you memorize lists of vocabulary words, you study lots and lots and lots of grammar rules. You do lots of reading and little fake conversation drills and activities. And this is the traditional old way of learning English, but we have a totally new and different way of learning it. And we're going to teach you each part of that, one part every day for a full 7 days. So let's start with part one, secret one, rule number one. Learn phrases, not individual words. Now, of course, a phrase is a group of words. It's a group of words that naturally go together. This is very important. You see, when you only study individual words, you are doing a number of things that make learning difficult. Number one, when you study just an individual word, like a vocabulary, something in a vocabulary list, or even in your notebook, you write one single word and then you write the meaning or the translation. Here's the problem. That word has no connections to anything else. Therefore, it's difficult for your brain to remember it. That's why you have to keep repeating again and again. You look at that list and you try to memorize it. And then the next day you forget, and then you go back and you try to memorize it again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and maybe after a very long time you might remember it. But most likely you're going to forget it, especially long term. And yet that's the way most students are learning English and studying vocabulary. Here's another problem with just learning single words. When you study just single words, you're not learning any grammar. But when you study phrases, you are actually learning grammar. It's a kind of an effortless, easy way to learn grammar. You don't need to think about rules. You don't need to think about anything, and yet you will be learning correct grammar when you study groups of words instead of phrases. Let me give you an example of this. Let's just, take any phrase like, or a simple sentence. He was a bad dog. He was a bad dog. Now, let's imagine that you're a new English student and, the word bad is new for you. Of course, I know you know it, but let's just imagine you go way back to the very beginning, your first year of learning English, and bad is a new word. Now, the normal way of studying that, you would write it down, bad, it would be in a little, a list, and then you would study, bad means not good, bad means not good. You'd probably translate it to your own language. And then after lots and lots and lots of time, maybe you would remember it. Well, using our system, you do something very different. You would write down that whole phrase. He was a bad dog. It's actually a full sentence. Or you could just write down, was a bad dog, or he was a bad dog, whatever. And then every single time you study or review, you would always study the full, complete phrase. You would never just study that word bad. You would study the whole thing. Now, by doing that, you're getting free grammar. How do you know? Well, because first of all, you're getting that verb, was. Right? Was. And that's just going to stick in your brain. He was, he was, he was. You're also learning articles. You don't need to remember what that means. You don't have to even worry about it. And yet you know that it's correct to say, in this situation, a bad dog. He was a bad dog. Some people say a. He was a bad dog. Both pronunciations are correct. So he was a bad dog. He was a bad dog. A lot of students have problems. When do I use a or a? When do I not? When do I use the? and you're trying to memorize all these super complicated rules and situations for it, forget that. It's too complicated. You'll never remember it. Just study phrases, and you'll start to feel when to use it, when it's correct, when it sounds correct, and when it sounds strange, when it's not correct to use those things. And of course, this is true for all grammar, all phrases, all vocabulary. By studying a full phrase, or even a full sentence, always, 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 you're going to get lots of grammar. You're going to learn which vocabulary words go together naturally, and you're going to know when to use them in which situations. Because sometimes, for example, there might be a situation where there are many words that mean the same thing, and yet we typically use one of them. Like, we might say, he was a bad dog. That's a common phrase. A bad dog, bad dog. We use that word bad to describe a dog who's naughty, who's not good. But we don't usually say horrendous. Now, horrendous means super, super bad, really terrible. And yet, we don't usually say he was a horrendous dog. It sounds strange. Even though the meaning is basically correct, yet in normal, real English, not textbooks, but real English, we just don't use that word to describe dogs. Not usually. I don't know why. There's no real rule about it. It's just that's what we usually do. And every language has these kinds of word combinations that are more common, and other word combinations which just aren't used typically. How do you learn that? Well, you can't learn it from any rules, because there are no rules about that. You have to learn it by studying phrases always. Always, always, always study phrases, review phrases. Whenever you learn a new word, don't just write down that individual word. Write down the full phrase, or even better, the full sentence that it's in. Always include the words that are around it. This is going to help you improve your English speaking ability much, much, much faster. Even better, when you write down the phrase, also write down where the phrase came from to remind yourself of the whole situation. So you might, let's say you find a new word in a newspaper article. Well, first of all, let's say the word horrendous. You're reading a newspaper article, or you're listening to the radio, you hear that word horrendous. That's new, what is that? And you write it down. But you're not going to write down just that single word, you're going to write down the whole phrase that it was in. And then you're also going to make a note, you're going to put down, this came from a newspaper article about the economy. And this is going to trigger you, it's going to remind you, give you a memory cue, a memory reminder of the full situation. So now you're not only getting just this single word, you're getting the full phrase or sentence that it's in, and you're also reminding yourself where that sentence came from. What was the general topic? What was the general situation? And in this way, you're getting a lot of extra grammar, which you're learning unconsciously, easily. You don't have to think about it, but you're learning it anyway. Your brain is learning it, even though you might not know that. And you're also learning when certain phrases and certain words are used and when they're not used. You're learning which situations it's used or they are used in, and you'll of course know that in other situations you don't use it. Because as you learn more and more and more phrases, you begin to get this feeling of correctness, and you begin to know when to use certain words, how to use them, and you're also how to use the grammar correctly as well. This is so important. It's such a simple, simple little secret, a simple little trick, a simple little rule, and yet it can totally change the way you speak English and learn English. It's very, very important. So never, never, never study just an individual word, one word. Always study the phrase or the sentence, and always, always, always make a note where it came from. And you want those phrases and sentences to come from real English, which we'll talk about more later, not from textbooks. Here's another advantage of studying phrases and full sentences and always knowing the situation that they came from. Phrasal verbs. You guys know about them. You know all about phrasal verbs that are a frustration for so many students, right? To be knocked out or knocked up have totally different meanings, right? Knocked out is a phrasal verb. It's a two-word verb. It's a verb phrase. And to be knocked out means to, like, it's like in boxing or sports. You get hit and you go, it's like you're asleep, right? Boom, knocked out on the floor. To be knocked up means to become pregnant. We use that for women. Now, there's no way if you just look at the individual words to know the meaning, right? Knocked out, knocked up. It's not logical. You just have to learn each one individually. But if you just try to study lists and lists and lists of phrasal verbs, you're going to become very confused. You'll start confusing one with the other. You're going to forget, and it's horrible, and you don't want to do that. It's not effective. It doesn't work. But if you learn those phrasal verbs from real situations, real sentences, real articles, real audios, real speech, and then you always study them in the whole sentence, so then you know the situation, right? If you get the whole sentence, the fighter knocked out the other fighter. And you're always studying that full phrase or sentence. The fighter knocked out the other fighter. You're going to just naturally know, you got that word fighter in there, helps you to remember the situation. And it helps you to remember the meaning of that phrase, knocked out. Or you can say, the woman got knocked up by her boyfriend, right? So now you're like, oh yeah, boyfriend. It gives you a clue, gives you an idea of the meaning of that phrase. And you'll know that you always use that phrase in situations that describe pregnancy. This is much better than studying lists and lists and lists of phrasal verbs. So, what's our first rule? What's our first secret? Always, always, always study phrases, groups of words. Always write down a note about where the phrase came from to remind you of the situation. And no more, never again, study just individual words. And that's all. That is powerful secret number one, rule number one for learning to speak fantastic, amazing English. Start using this rule immediately today. Okay? We'll see you tomorrow for rule 2. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Joe Weiss, and I'm one of the directors of Learn Real English. And today, I'm going to be teaching you rule number 2 for excellent English speaking. Okay, so what is rule number 2? Well, rule number 2 is quite simple. Rule number 2 is do not study grammar rules. Do not study grammar rules. Now, I know this may be a surprise to you because your English teachers have always told you that you must study grammar rules. In high schools or secondary schools, in universities, in language schools, the English teachers teach grammar, and then they teach more grammar, and then they teach even more grammar. And that is the method that you have used to study English. So, now I have a question for you. Have you been successful using that method? If you're watching this video, then you've studied English before. That means you have probably studied a lot of grammar rules. So you need to ask yourself this question. Can you speak English quickly, easily, and automatically? If the answer is no, then you need to ask why not? Why not? Because you have been studying English for many years. Why can't you speak English quickly, easily, and automatically? Well, the answer for most people is because they studied too much grammar. But you are not to blame for this. No. Your English teachers are to blame for this because your English teachers made you study grammar. I bet you hated studying grammar rules, but you did it because your English teachers made you study them. Okay, so why is it bad to study grammar rules? Well, when you study grammar rules, then you think about these grammar rules. You think about the past perfect tense, the present perfect tense, the future perfect tense, prepositions. You think about all these grammar rules before you speak. And when you speak, you do not have a lot of time. When you're writing, you have a lot more time. You can write slowly. You can correct your mistakes. You can even look in a book if you need help. When you're writing, you have a lot of time. But when you are speaking, you do not have a lot of time. When you are speaking, there is no time to think about verb tenses and verb conjugations and definite articles, indefinite articles, adverbs. There is no time to think about those grammar rules when you are speaking. When someone asks you a question, they want you to answer that question immediately. They don't want to wait 1 minute while you're thinking about grammar rules. No, no, no. So, that is why it is important that you not study grammar rules. When you study grammar rules, then you think about those grammar rules before you speak, and that means that you hesitate before you speak, and you speak much slower, and you understand much slower. Okay, so how do native speakers learn grammar then? Well, I am an English native speaker, and I can tell you that I never studied grammar rules when I was a young boy and I was learning how to speak English. When I was 3 years old and I was learning how to speak English, my mother and father never made me study grammar rules. They didn't do it. So, I still speak English very well and I use correct grammar. And I never studied grammar rules. Well, when I was 12 years old, I studied grammar rules in school, but that was for writing. It was only for writing, it was not for speaking. You do not want to study grammar rules for speaking. For writing, it's different. Okay, so how do native speakers learn grammar then? Well, they learn grammar through listening. Listening to correct grammar again and again and again and again. And when you listen to this grammar over and over again, it gets stored deeply in your brain. Then, when it is time for you to speak, you will be able to use this grammar because you will know what correct English grammar sounds like. Okay, so the best way to learn grammar is through input. So listening is one form of input. Listening to correct grammar over and over again. Now reading is another form of grammar. Is another form of input. And you can use reading also to learn grammar, but you won't use it as much as listening. Most of the time you will have listening as your main form of input. But if you do read, please, do not read textbooks. You should read easy English novels. Maybe novels that a young child would read. But most of your input will come from listening. You will listen to correct grammar over and over again. And this is how you will learn grammar. This is how a child or a native speaker learns grammar. And you do it quickly, easily, and automatically without memorizing any grammar rules. Okay, so today we're speaking about rule number 2. So tomorrow we will be sending you rule number 3. But in rule number 5, I am going to tell you a powerful way for you to learn grammar, be it English grammar or the grammar for any other language. And this is a very simple, powerful way to learn grammar. And I promise you, it will not involve memorizing any grammar rules. So I'm sure you're happy about that. But the rule today is rule number 2. And rule number 2 is don't study grammar rules. Do not study grammar rules. When you study grammar rules, you think about the grammar before you speak, and then you hesitate before you speak. You speak much slower, and you understand much slower. So if you have any grammar books, throw them away. Bury them in your backyard. You can even burn them. But if you do burn them, please be safe, okay? Okay, so this is the end of rule number 2. I hope that you're enjoying the 7 rules to excellent English speaking course. We are really happy to have you with us. And have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Kristen Dodds. Welcome to rule number 3. Rule number 3 is very simple, it's very easy, and it's very powerful. In fact, it's the most important rule. What is this rule? Well, rule number 3 is the listen first rule. What do I mean by listen first? I mean learn with your ears and not with your eyes. So learn with your ears, not with your eyes. Listen, listen, listen. Ideally, you want to listen for 6 months or longer if possible before speaking. Listening is the key to fluency. Now, why focus on listening first? Why learn with your ears and not with your eyes? With listening, you will learn grammar, you will learn vocabulary, you will understand better, and you will get faster. There's a lot of research about listening first. Listening is the most important thing you can do. If you learned English the way that I learned French in middle school, high school, and college or university, then you probably have problems speaking English. Because in school, you learned with your eyes. For example, there was a focus on textbooks, on learning from textbooks. You learned how to read English. You learned how to write English. You learned how to think about English. So that you probably know a lot of grammar rules. You probably know more grammar rules than a native English speaker. That's because native English speakers don't learn with their eyes. They learn with their ears. A baby doesn't pick up a textbook and start studying grammar rules. A baby does not learn with their eyes. A baby learns with the ears by listening. A baby learns by listening to the parents make sounds and speak to them. A baby just listens and listens and listens for a year and a half to 2 years before they start speaking. So, how must you learn English? You must learn English by listening first. You must listen first if you want to speak English automatically, easily, quickly, and correctly. Now, there are 2 important things to remember with rule number 3. The first thing is, what do you listen to? You want to make sure that you are listening to easy English. So what do I mean by easy English? I mean that you want to be able to understand 95% or more of the English you're listening to without stopping or without using a dictionary. So for example, you might listen to a children's program, or you might listen to a children's audiobook. Another example would be a children's movie. If these are too easy, then increase the level a little bit. You could listen to a teenager's program. Now, by teenager, I mean, in American years, teenager would be 13, 14, 15, up to 19 years old. So if a children's program or audiobook is too easy, try listening to a teenager program or audiobook, teenager movie. These are all examples of things that you can listen to for easy English. It is okay to listen to something that's a little bit difficult if you have the text. For example, if you're listening to an English lesson, as long as you have the text, that's okay. As long as you can read along, that's okay. Another example would be an audio article or a speech. As long as you have the text, these things would be okay. Second, the second important thing I want you to remember is, when do you listen? You want to listen all the time. So get an MP3 player or get an iPod and listen, listen, listen. Listen all the time. Listen on your way to work. Listen on your lunch break. Listen when you're exercising. Listen on your way home from work. Listen in the evenings or before you go to bed. Listen as much as you can. Now, rule number 3, listen first. It's super easy and super powerful. Focus on learning with your ears and not with your eyes. Remember, it's the most powerful rule. Okay, that's all for rule number 3. Tomorrow, you'll receive rule number 4. So, see you later. See you next time. Bye.
Hi, I'm AJ Hogue, one of the teachers of Learn Real English. Welcome to day 4 of our video course. Secret number 4, rule number 4 is this: learn deeply. Learn deeply. So what does that mean? Well, of course, deep, if you think of water, like the ocean, deep means something goes down, 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 very, very far. The opposite of deep is shallow, meaning it does not go down far, just a short little bit. So what does that mean when we're talking about learning? Well, you need to think about like your mind, your brain. So if you learn something deeply, the idea is that it goes deep, deep, deep. It goes into your brain very far, meaning that it's part of you. You'll never, never, never forget it. You totally master it. It becomes simple and easy and automatic. That's the idea of learn deeply. See, you need to think about speaking English like a sport. You see, English learning, it's not like math or science. It's not just something that you memorize. It's actually a skill that you need to use, right? You need to perform. It doesn't matter how much you remember. What matters is, can you do it? When you're talking in a real conversation, can you understand instantly and quickly what the other person is saying? When they ask you questions, can you understand the question instantly and respond, answer immediately? When you speak, can you speak easily and automatically without stopping, without thinking, without worrying about grammar rules, without all of those problems, without feeling nervous? Right? It doesn't matter what you remember for a test. What matters, what's important, is what you can actually do in a real situation. If you're having a job interview in English, can you do it? Can you actually do it? Doesn't matter what happens on the test. What matters is when you're facing that other person, how well do you understand? How well do you speak? How relaxed do you feel? How confident are you? Right? That's what you want. You want to actually be able to do it. And that's more like a sport. And so you need to start learning English like you're training, like you're preparing for a sport. And that's why learning deeply is so important. Let's imagine this. Let's imagine, let's say, a basketball player. Now, basketball players, they have to be very, very good at the basics, the most important parts of playing basketball. That is the most important thing. If you ever watch interviews with the really great basketball players, the top ones, they will always say that the basic skills are the most important. Now, these guys can do very advanced, amazing things. But if you listen to these interviews, they always say that mostly what they practice are the basic skills. The basic skill of shooting. They will practice that basic skill of shooting thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Even though they are already one of the best in the world, still every day they practice that basic skill again and again. Or dribbling, which is bouncing the ball, right, and passing it. Those super basic skills, they continue practicing them forever. They practice those skills thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of times so that they never have to think about them. So during a game, they just shoot. They don't think about their arm and what they do with their legs. No, it's so automatic. They've practiced it so many times. It's so deep in their brain that they just do it. It's totally without effort. It's super easy. Same with passing. Same with bouncing and dribbling. Well, that's what you need to do with English. You need to have that same feeling that when you speak, there's no effort, there's no thinking. It just comes out easily and automatically. And the only way you do that is by focusing on deep learning. It means you totally master something. So this is the problem in school. In school, teachers and schools are always trying to make you go faster, 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 more, 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 more. You never learn anything deeply. Right? They'll teach you the past tense, for example, and maybe you'll practice it, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then take a test, and then you go to the next chapter and they teach you, the past progressive or, the present perfect or some other verb tense. And you study that one for a few weeks, and then they teach you another one, and then another one, and another one, but you never really learn the past tense deeply. And so you're getting all these verb tenses and all this grammar and all this vocabulary, but you never learn any of it deeply so that you can use it automatically without thinking. It's always more, 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 faster, faster, faster. That is the opposite of deep learning. What you need to do is slow down and repeat more. Repetition is the mother of skill. It's a Tony Robbins quote, and I love it. It means if you really want to be skillful at something, you really want to be able to do something well, you have to repeat it many, many, many times. That means, for example, with the past tense, you need to hear that thousands upon thousands and thousands and thousands of times correctly so that it goes so deep inside you that you just feel it. You know when it's correct. You know how to use it, and you never have to think of it. Of course, when I speak English and use the past tense, I never think about grammar rules at all, or any verb tense. I don't think about them because I've heard them so many times. And especially when I was a child, nobody forced me to study advanced grammar rules. Nobody confused me with that. Instead, I listen to lots of simple language, lots of simple, basic language, basic sentences, basic grammar from my family for several years. And I didn't learn that advanced stuff until much later, until I had totally mastered the basics. So that's what you need to do too. You need to really start focusing on repeating more. So that means that when you have a lesson, for example, let's say you're using one of our lessons, instead of just studying it a couple days and then going to the next one, and then study that one a few days, and then going to the next one, and trying to go very fast, you'll do the opposite. You'll take one lesson set, you'll listen to it every day for 1 week or 2 weeks, maybe even longer. You'll keep listening to it every single day, maybe 1 hour a day, until you totally know it deeply inside and you can use it easily. So that when you're listening to that lesson, you understand all of it instantly. No thought, nothing. It's super easy. And then you'll still listen a few more days. That's how you will get it deep inside of you so that you can stop translating and stop thinking and just use English automatically, effortlessly. So learn deeply means repeat everything a lot, many, many, many times. So you want every audio that you listen to, every lesson set from us that you listen to, you want to listen to it for at least 7 days, and 2 weeks is even better. Every single day for 14 days, or every single day for 7 days, between that amount of time. So that at the end of that, you totally and completely know it very well. And in every one of our lessons, we're going to repeat the basics, the most important parts of the language, again and again and again. So when you go to the next lesson, you're still going to get a lot of repetition. And when you go to the next one, you'll get a lot of repetition. And in this way, we train you, we teach you to not only know English for a test, but to actually use it correctly and easily every time. And that's what you really want. And that's it. That is rule number 4, learn deeply. All right, we'll see you again tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Joe Weiss, one of the directors of Learn Real English. And today, you are going to be learning rule number 5 for excellent English speaking. But before I talk about rule number 5, I want you to think back a couple of days to rule number 2. Rule number 2 is do not study grammar rules. When you study grammar rules, then you think about that grammar before you speak. And that causes you to hesitate, and you speak much slower, and you understand much slower. So, since you learned rule number 2, you may have wondered, how am I going to learn to speak English with correct grammar if I do not learn grammar rules? Well, that's what I am going to be teaching you today. Okay, so how do we do it? Well, there is a simple, powerful technique, and there is research that shows that this technique is the best way to learn grammar. Best way to learn English grammar or grammar for any language. Okay, so what is this technique? Well, the technique is called point of view stories, or sometimes it's even called point of view mini stories. Mini means small, so a mini story is just a short story. So rule number 5 is use point of view stories. Okay, so now that I've told you what the technique is, how do we use this technique? How do we use point of view stories? Well, first, I tell you a story, a mini story. Then second, I tell you the same story, but this time I change the point of view of the story. So you may be wondering, what does it mean to change the point of view of the story? Well, one way to change the point of view of the story is to change the time that the story occurs. So in the first story, I may tell you that story in the present. Then in the second story, I tell you the same story in the past. So that is how I change the point of view. Another way to change the point of view is to change the person who is actually telling the story or narrating the story. Now, I'll give you an example of that later in this video. But one important thing to remember is each time that you change the point of view of the story, you change the grammar in the story. So each time I tell you the story, I tell you the same story, but you hear different grammar. Okay, so now that I've told you how to use this technique, I think it's a good idea that we practice. So let's practice this technique. So I will tell you a story in the present right now. Okay, let's start. There is a man, and his name is John. And John goes to the store, and John buys a shirt. And the shirt is blue. And John pays $20 for the shirt. Okay, so that is our first story, told in the present. Now your job is easy. You just listen to this story. You listen, and you just try to understand what is happening in the story. And you listen many times because we want this information to be stored deeply in your memory. Okay, so how do we use these stories to learn grammar? Well, now I'm going to tell you this story again. Same story, but this time I'm going to tell you the story in the past. So let's start the story. 1 year ago, there was a man, and his name was John. Now, John went to the store, and John bought a shirt, and the shirt was blue, and John paid $20 for the shirt. Okay, so that is the end of the story that I'm telling the second time, in the past this time. Now, I want to tell you that this is just a very simple and short example. Now, if you get any of our video lessons or our audio lessons, or if you come to our live event, like one of our seminars, the stories are much longer and they're much more difficult. But in this easy example, we have just heard the story 2 times. We heard the same story, but one time we heard it in the past, and one time we heard it in the present. So now you would listen to this story, listen many, many times. And when you listen, do not think about grammar. Do not think about what verb tense I'm using. Do not think about whether I'm using irregular verb form. No, do not think about that. When you listen, you simply listen and you try to understand the story. That's all you need to do. That's why this method is so easy yet so powerful. You hear these different stories and you hear them many times. You hear the same story with different grammar. And soon this grammar becomes deeply stored in your brain. And when you speak, you will be able to use this grammar. Okay, let's continue practicing this method. Now, I am going to tell you this story in the future. So let's start the story. 1 year from now, in the future, there will be a man. And his name is going to be John. Now, John is going to go to the store. And John is going to buy a shirt. And the shirt will be blue. And John is going to pay $20 for the shirt. Okay, so now we have heard the same story 3 different ways. We've heard it in the past, the present, and the future. Now, you notice this is the same story, but the words in each story are different as we change the point of view. So once again, you would listen to this story many, many times. You would not think about grammar at all. You would just listen and try and understand the story. Okay, now I would like to continue practicing this technique. I want to tell you one more story. This time, I'm going to change the point of view of the story so that John, the character in our story, is telling the story. Let's start the story. I am a man, and my name is John. I went to the store, and I bought a shirt. The shirt was blue, and I paid $20 for the shirt. Okay, so that is the end of our fourth story. The same story that we have heard each time, but the fourth time I am telling you this story. You can hear how the words in the story change, but the story stays the same. So this is a very powerful way for you to learn grammar. You will listen to this story again and again, and you will not think about grammar. You will simply listen and try to understand what is happening in the story. That's why this is such a simple, powerful way for you to learn grammar. You hear correct grammar many, many times, and it is stored deeply in your brain. Then, when you speak English, you are able to use this correct grammar, and you will be able to speak quickly, easily, and confidently. And your friends and coworkers will notice that your English has become stronger and that you speak more confidently. When you learn English using point of view stories, you learn English just like a native speaker would. You learn like a child would learn by listening, listening, listening. Okay, so rule number 5 is use point of view stories. They are a powerful, easy way to learn grammar without memorizing boring grammar rules. Okay, so this is the end of rule number 5. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Kristen Dodds, and I'm going to talk to you today about rule number 6. Now, rule number 6 is a simple rule, and it's a fun rule. Rule number 6 will help you to learn idioms and slang. Rule number 6 will help you to speak excellent English. So what is rule number 6? Rule number 6 is use real English materials. Don't use textbooks. Don't use textbook CDs. In fact, burn your textbooks and burn your textbook CDs. Use real English materials. Now, how can you learn English using real English materials? By getting real materials that native English speakers would use. I'm going to discuss 2 examples of real English materials. The first example are reading materials. Reading is a good choice if you like to read. Reading is great for learning English. Don't read textbooks. Find materials that are easy enough to understand when you're reading. And find materials that are fun and that interest you. So you might have to start out with children's books. Or if children's books are too easy, you could try comic books. And if comic books are too easy, or maybe they don't interest you, you could try teenager books. And by teenager, I mean, in America, teenager is a young adult from the age of 13 to 19. And eventually, you will advance to the level of being able to read magazines or newspapers or novels or articles on the internet, our listening materials. Now, listening is a great choice because listening should be 80% of English learning. Don't listen to textbook CDs, though. Don't listen to people acting out a dialogue as if they're talking in a real conversation. Find materials that are easy enough to listen to. And by this, I mean that you should be able to understand at least 95% of what you're listening to without pausing and without looking in a dictionary. So also find materials that are fun and find materials that interest you. So you may need to start with children's TV programs, or maybe children's movies, or children's audiobooks. Now, I mentioned audiobooks in rule number 3, but I didn't explain what they are. Audiobooks are simply a book that someone is reading, and while they're reading it, they're recording it so that you can then listen. Now, if children's TV programs or children's movies or children's audiobooks are too easy, then try teenager TV programs or teenage movies or teenage audiobooks. And then eventually, if you're not already there, you'll advance to the level of being able to listen to podcasts or the news or adult TV programs or adult movies or adult audiobooks. Now, why not learn English by reading an English textbook or by listening to a textbook CD? Because these materials are not real. They're not normal English. Textbooks teach formal English or written English. The vocabulary and the style are for writing. Textbook CDs have people who are acting out conversations. They're not speaking naturally. So, for rule number 6, remember, use real English materials. Find real English reading materials that are fun, interesting, and easy enough to understand. Find real English listening materials that are also fun and easy enough to understand, and are also interesting. Rule number 6 is simple and it's fun. Use real English materials. No more boring textbooks. No more boring textbook CDs. Real English materials. Okay, that's all for rule number 6. Tomorrow you'll get rule number 7. See you later. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm AJ Hogue, one of the teachers of Learn Real English. And today is your last day, the last secret, the last rule, and we saved the best one for last. The last rule, the last secret is to use listen and answer stories and learn how to think in English. See, the problem in schools, one of the problems, one of the many problems with English education, is that most students learn English through translation. Right? You learned English probably from a teacher who spoke your own language. So when you were studying English, you were always translating to your language from your language. When you studied vocabulary, you would memorize the meaning in your language, translation. You also learn lots and lots and lots and lots of grammar rules. And so that makes you think all the time about English. When you're supposed to be speaking, when you should be speaking easily without thinking, instead you're thinking about grammar, you're thinking about vocabulary, you're also feeling nervous. All of these things are happening, and that's why your speaking is not so great right now. But we've given you 6 rules already, and now I'm giving you number 7 to give you a totally new way to learn so that you can teach yourself again. Teach yourself English again, and in this way, by following all of these rules, you will learn to speak in a very easy, effortless way without thinking. You will learn to think in English so that the thought comes to you in English and then it comes out of your mouth in English. When someone speaks to you, you just know the meaning. You don't have to translate to your language and back again. And the most powerful way to do this is to use listen and answer stories. This is really the center part of our system, the most powerful part. It's essential. It's so, so, so important. So what are they? What is a listen and answer story? Well, this is a very, very special way of teaching English. So what happens is the teacher asks a story in a very special and specific way. And when the teacher uses this method and this technique, it trains you, it teaches you, and teaches your brain to begin thinking in English. It also teaches you to understand faster, 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 and faster, and to respond, to speak faster and faster and faster without translating, without thinking about anything. So how does that work? You probably noticed I said the teacher asks a story, not the teacher tells a story. So the important part of this technique and this method is the teacher will tell a funny, crazy story. And we make them funny and crazy because they're easier to remember. See, if we tell you a normal, boring story, you'll probably forget it. But if we tell you a story that's funny and crazy and strange, you'll remember the story. You will also remember the grammar and vocabulary in that story. That's why we make them funny and strange and crazy. The other thing we do is that we ask the story, meaning we create a story using lots and lots and lots of simple, easy questions. You see, if we just tell you a story, it's passive. You just sit there and you listen and you don't do anything. You're listening to the story. But if we ask you questions and questions and questions, you have to do something. Your brain has to understand the question and then answer it immediately, because we ask these questions fairly fast. Now, the good news is they're very simple, easy questions. That's also important. You see, if we ask you difficult questions, again, you're going to stop and think. And that will teach you to understand more slowly and to speak more slowly. We don't want that. Instead, by using really, really easy, simple questions, we teach you to instantly understand. They're simple and easy, so you will understand them quickly. And then you don't have to think about the answer. It's so obvious, it's so easy that you can just say it immediately, very fast. That is so important because that trains you, it teaches you to respond instantly. This is how we're going to make your brain understand and use English faster and faster and faster and faster. And that's how you learn to start thinking in English. And you stop thinking in your own language. Instead, you think in English, you understand English instantly, and you speak it instantly. So what happens is the teacher just asks you a bunch of questions. You know, what was there? And you're like, I don't know. And we say, there was a boy. Ah, was there a boy? And you say, yes, there was a boy. You say, that's right, yes, there was a boy. Was there a boy or was there a girl? And you say, there was a boy. And we just continue telling this story. It becomes stranger and more difficult. But we just keep asking lots and lots and lots and lots of these questions. And your job is just to shout the answer. You use your body, you use your voice, you use a loud voice. You want to teach yourself to be confident and happy while speaking English. And that's it. And by asking lots and lots of questions, we start repeating the important grammar many, 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 many times. We repeat the important vocabulary many, 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 many times. You don't have to study anything. There's no lists for you to read. You just answer the simple questions. That's all. And you enjoy this funny, crazy story. I mean, they're fun. They're funny. It's not like studying something boring or terrible. It's a funny, entertaining story. And by doing this, constantly, we ask questions, you answer them, just shouting them out loud as you listen on your iPod or you listen on your computer. You train yourself to think in English, understand instantly, speak very quickly. It's so powerful. This is the most powerful part of our system. So, rule number 7, the most powerful rule, use, listen, and answer stories. Train yourself to think in English. And that is our last rule. Congratulations, you did it. You've finished our video course. So what's next? Well, you have 2 choices. Choice number 1, you can use all of the rules we have taught you, and you can create your own independent study plan. And this is powerful and effective. It means you have to go out there, maybe you have to find your own private teacher to create some listen and answer stories for you, and you have to find some of your own materials, but you can do it. You put them all together in your own independent learning plan using these 7 rules, and by doing this every single day, you will improve. I promise you, you're going to improve, and you're going to improve quickly. Choice number 2, you can buy our lessons today, our Learn Real English lessons. Now, our Learn Real English lessons use all of the 7 rules. We created these lessons because they're convenient. It's an easy and convenient way for you to use all of the 7 rules. You don't have to go find a teacher and tell them about these rules. You don't have to go and try to look for lots of different materials. Everything you need, we give you immediately. So if you're interested in that, and I recommend it highly, just go to our homepage, learnrealenglish.com, and then go to the bottom. You can read about it. You'll learn something about our lessons. And go to the bottom and click the big button that says Order Now or Buy Now. And you will immediately start. See, our lessons are digital, meaning after you buy them, you can download them to your computer right now. So you can get started today using all of these 7 rules and start improving your English right now. We look forward to having you as one of our students. When you become one of our students, when you get our lessons, you can join our social website and you can ask questions. You can meet other students from around the world. It's a fantastic group. Very positive group of people, very, very friendly, and they will support you. They'll answer your questions. They'll help you. If you're feeling discouraged, they will encourage you and give you lots of positive energy. So it's really a fantastic group. So I hope you join us today, get our lessons, go to our homepage, and I will see you again soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.